housekeeping. So I was explaining to all our participants, we already have 12 people in, that this is going to be a discussion session. We're going to be talking about trade, of course, and we will be answering to some of the questions that you guys asked during the first day, and we didn't have the time we needed to answer them. So just to let you know, as this is a session, if you would like to participate in the discussion, if you would like to hop into the screen, you can request this. When you need to click in the button that says ask to share audio and video, and like that this will come to me and I will allow you into the screen, and you will be able to participate with your audio and your video and talk to our speakers or ask any questions you have or anything like that. If you are not speaking at that moment, I'm going to ask you please to keep your microphone muted, just to have it easier way of working all together. And then if we're talking about something and you want to pin like a specific speaker that it's talking at the moment, you can also do that. So you can go then the speaker will appear full screen and you will be able to see only this speaker on this screen. Please feel free to ask any questions you have in the Q&A function that we have or in the chat. We will go through them. And as I said, if you would like to intervene in the session, you can share your audio and video. You don't need to do this to listen to it. You just need to do it if you want to talk or ask something else. So we can start now that we have some people going in. So, for example, one of the questions that we have, it's related to when we have trade or fishermen fishing a species that we don't want them to fish. One of the methods that we can apply is the release method, that then we will pay them to release the animal or anything like that. So what they ask, will you keep control of how many individuals do the fishermen release? How many sharks do the fishermen release? Like, how would you keep the check of this and make sure that it's actually happening?
I don't do any releases, so I'm gonna see if Claire has something to say.
Yeah, I think that might be Hollie's sort of speciality.
Yeah.
But I imagine that you probably need to take, I don't know, maybe like something like a time-stamped photo or something like that. Lots of fishermen have phones now, so there's lots of sort of studies and work that takes advantage of the fact that a lot of people will take their phones out fishing. So I imagine that would probably be quite a good way to do it.
Yeah, there could be also some small external tags with numbers to have a sense of how many are being released. But yeah, I think Hollie would be the best person to answer that.
Yeah, so I'm sorry to all the speakers. Unfortunately, Hollie has not been able to all the speakers and to all the participants. Hollie has not been able to make it here today. But yeah, I think between the three of us will make it work. I think other method that they usually have is taking videos. You just take a video of the moment that when you are releasing the animal, and then you send this video to the researchers, and like that they make sure that this is happening. Perfect. So another questions that we had, this one is for you, Anna. They say, congratulations on the initiative to mapping the global shark meat trade. Their question is, why don't we ask governments instead of fisheries to study this shark exportation and import data origin and the destination, the buyer, etc.? So if it's possible to actually ask the government instead of the fishermen.
Yeah, that's a good point. Unfortunately, this is not a very easy information to get from governments. Certain countries will have that information easily accessible through the fisheries department or through some regional fisheries organizations. But overall, it's not that easy. Some countries don't have it at all. Some countries just don't make it available. But yeah, it would be great if you could just go to one source and get all the information, but we don't. And even when we get that information, especially when it's regarding international trade, everything that is traded has to go into a certain bin that we call a commodity code. And for sharks and rays, there's only a few. I'm going to say overall 4. There are some extra ones and with a little bit more details, but those are more recent. But overall, there are 4. You can only trade sharks and rays. And when you declare that, you're going to know if it's a shark or a ray and if it's fresh or it's frozen. Those are the only 4 categories that I go to. So there's no information about the species in that. So even when we get that information, it's not like super helpful because there's no species specific information in that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we had kind of a similar discussion during one of the days of the workshop about this, and they said sometimes it's more accessible to have the information from the fishermen. Do you have anything to add about this, Claire?
Yeah, no, I just agree. It's really hard disaggregating those sort of codes. So that's why it's really helpful to speak further down the value chain.
Perfect. Then we can move into another question. I think this is a very difficult question. So let's see if you can handle it. I'm sure you will. So they are asking, what is the minimum stock level of sharks in a country's territorial waters that would warrant exclusive focus on shark conservation instead of shark fisheries?
I don't think there's an answer for that, right? I think like sharks, and there's so many species of sharks and rays with different life histories. I don't think there's one number that would answer that question.
I think also as well, like Rima was saying the other day, stock assessments are broadly unavailable for most shark species, especially thinking about certain geographical ranges as well. So it's not something that that's one of the issues when we talk about sustainable fisheries with, sustainable management for shark fisheries. It's very difficult because we don't have sort of the biological reference points. So I think there's a sort of argument, isn't there, at the moment about sort of total bans versus sustainable fisheries. And it's a very difficult thing to answer, and it will be context specific as to which sort of management is going to work best. But unfortunately, one of the massive obstacles to this sustainable fisheries management argument is the fact that we just don't have those biological reference points, and the fact that most shark fisheries are mixed species as well. Well, a lot of fisheries are mixed species, aren't they? But, you're talking about, really different life histories. So it's really difficult to manage shark fisheries that way, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much. I completely agree with everything you said. Like I said, it's a very difficult question to give a straight answer. Okay, moving to the next question. I think this is more like a clarification, discussion, opinion question. So this man says that in his country, sharks are sometimes discarded as trash fish because of the taste preferences, and that they don't really have any culinary or food traditions in some of the countries. So this makes many people be unaware of the different uses that shark can have, for example, in economy and in conservation, and it is that they don't prioritize these different uses because they don't know about them. He thinks that assessing how sustainably can we fish sharks and use sharks is the best approach to deal with it. And he would like to know if you can add any more clarification of what can be the key steps towards the sustainable approach to shark trade.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I guess one of the things in sort of some of the countries that I work in is that they are sort of zero waste fisheries in a way, which I think is one of the nice things, in that every part of the shark is used, and it does seem a massive shame if they're completely just thrown away, because at the end of the day, you know, a lot of the shark that is landed around the world is bycatch. So you know, and if there's no sort of a market or sort of traditions in using the sharks, and that's going to be an awful lot of sharks that are thrown away, and that's not an ideal situation. I mean, you don't want to be seen to sort of be promoting shark, you know, fisheries, I guess, in a way, but you also don't want to be wasting them. So that's a difficult question, I guess.
Is there anything?
I agree. It's just hard to answer as well, because the reality for shark fisheries and trade and consumption varies so much from country to country. So even though in some countries sharks are not used, or people don't know what to do with them, and many others they are highly preferred. So it's just tricky one.
Yeah, we actually have another question related to this one, and related to the bycatch and the fact that the sharks will end up dying anyway. That it's, if you know about any strategies that can help. He puts as an example the European Union, but maybe you know about other areas, to end with these like destructive quota obligations that at the end lead to the death of the sharks anyway, and the high bycatch discards that we have.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I mean, I sort of worked a little bit on the EU sort of, you know, the discards and everything, because that is a massive issue. I guess it also depends on survivability as well, because even just within sharks, you've got a massively different rate of survivability, like post-release. So, for example, some of the ones that are caught along the UK, I know they've got relatively high survivability. So it's a bit more sort of feasible thinking about actually discarding. Whereas, like, if you're talking about, you know, like some sharks, they're almost like 100% going to be dead if they've been on a long line for like more than, I don't know, like an hour or something like that. So I think that's something that it would have to be like a species specific, fishery specific sort of approach, really. And yeah, it's not difficult. I mean, it's not an easy thing to answer, because you don't want discards, and a lot of the time that goes against sort of like social norms as well. So it's asking fishers to do something that they just think is entirely wasteful, and you know, that's not good either. So I think there's lots of different things to take into consideration with thinking about that.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah, definitely. We're going back to the global shark trade mapping. So Anna, I assume this is for you. They asked, who do we look for to understand trade? But we already answered to this, that it's very difficult to get the source of aid. But they would like to know if, when you are understanding it, if they give you any certificate of origin of the meat or of other kind of trading papers or document, or if you have like a source where to get these documents or anything like that, with the date and the time and location and things like that.
Yeah, you can get that roughly from some countries. Most of them no. Some countries will have specific websites where they record their imports and exports, and you can have a rough idea of what's going on. But again, what you're going to see is like shark or ray, fresh or frozen, and a number attached to that. So we try to do that in the beginning, but it turns out to not be like super informative to get down to the actual composition of the trade. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think in all the different countries it works completely different, and probably you need to take different ways to get the data you need. This is, we have also. Yeah, we have a kind of a difficult question too, that they are asking, what are the key steps, like assessments or regulation or awareness, education, things like that, that will be necessary to achieve a sustainable approach to shark trade? Like, what would you say is essential?
I think to say data is so important if you're talking about sustainable fisheries management. And I think that is kind of where a lot of the stuff stumbles at the moment, is just having the data available on extraction rates, but also populations as well. It's very difficult to talk about sustainable fisheries management without those reference points. And then I guess only at that point can you get onto the next bit. I don't know, the awareness or.
Yeah, I know it seemed like I answered all the questions the same, but as I've been looking at trade at a global perspective, it varies so much from place to place. So again, I don't think there's a recipe for this. So what works in a country is not necessarily it's going to work in another. To me, I totally agree that we need data. We need decisions to be made based on a solid background of scientific information. I think that's essential for the life history, essential for the stock assessments. I don't think we can go anywhere without that. I think we need to expand monitoring programs. We already know there's an area that is too large to cover. So we need to focus on getting new technologies or some other approaches that could help us to monitor our fisheries more closely. And I guess the other thing I would say is stakeholder engagement. We need to involve the people that are part of the fisheries to be able to make the right decisions and to ensure the compliance and engagement. So I don't know, other people might disagree with me, but I think those are the three key steps that come to mind right now to achieve sustainability.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult goal, or a long-term goal, achieving sustainability in the whole world for all the species and everything. And of course, we need to work step by step to have it moving forward. And it's a very broad question, this one, to answer.
I was going to say, I think that maybe within shark and rays specifically, we need to think about what are our sort of data, what data will we include as, or what data can we use? Because I think realistically relying on sort of traditional data at the level that some other fisheries can get, teleost fisheries. So I think I think there is lots of really good work at the moment, sort of expanding the type of data that we use. So community-based data, community-based reference points for sustainability, just exploring those sorts of options. Because I think for sharks and rays, it's that we're probably not going to get to those sort of gold standard data points that we have in other fisheries. So I think it's about thinking about what are the other options and how can they be adopted within management, sort of, along the lines of the community engagement, for sure.
And those are extremely helpful, especially for critically endangered species already, that we cannot just afford losing more of them to collect a vertebrae or something to do age and growth. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we had in the chat someone making this, where he was saying that in Australia they have some gummy sharks that are sold as flake, and basically they do genetic fingerprints to be sold of what is being sold as flake, to reveal the species that they have and the range of the species that it's using. And actually some of them are not from Australian waters apparently. So yeah, maybe doing genetics of the meat that it's in the market can be a good point to assess the species that it's being used. And maybe also
this is one part of our project. We're not doing that specifically in Australia, but some of the countries that we identified as potentially main players. We have some genetic analysis going on to identify either the species or the origin of the species traded.
Yeah, very, very, very super interesting, I think. We have another question for you, Anna.
Okay.
This question is from Alifa Haq, one of our speakers from Local Ecological Knowledge. So she thinks that it looks like most of the meat are aggregated while they are traded without much species-specific understanding. So you don't really get to know the species that they're using. So if there's any way that you can be able to assess the species of a specific trait, or if you mostly focus on groups or like for the preliminary results.
Okay. The main objective of our project is to assess the international trade of shark meat by species. So we want to do it species specific, using a combination of lots of data sources, expert opinion, and lots of modeling. So we having some preliminary results. They are very promising. Obviously, the more data we have for a certain country, better our models will come out and more certainty we will have in our results. For some others, we still have to do some tweaks here and there to make sure it happens, but slowly, country by country, we're getting there.
Nice, very, very interesting. I think it's it can be kind of difficult to assess species-specific groups, especially because many times it is sold as one species when it's actually not that one, or under a different name and things like that, which can definitely make it tricky. And it leads me to one of the questions that we have, and that it's like, do you think that the approaches that we use to study legal trade can also be used to study illegal trade or like illegal activities, or do you think that we will need to make a different approach for this? Because might be, for example, you have a market where some of the species that are there are legal and some others are illegal. So how would you deal with this, or would you make a different approach?
For me, specifically in this project, we are not able to deal with illegal trade because we work with data that is reported. From some countries that we have market surveys in place, we can have a better idea of what is traded illegally and how much of what percentage of the trade comes from illegal catch. But overall, at a global scale, it's really hard because if it's not reported, we can't really have access to that.
Yeah, I think it depends what stage of the value chain you're sort of working at and which data you're working with, because I tend to do stuff that sort of group stuff together. So I'm not specifically separating out like illegal and legal. And that's because I don't even think, like, for example, the stakeholders that I speak to would be able to do that, because at that point it's, you know, they don't know what species it is, or so it kind of all comes under one. And I think that's some of the bigger scale, like data studies, such as, you know, what Anna's doing, are really interesting, because then you can start to see sort of the like the gaps, or sort of, you know, like match up the numbers between like what's being exported and what's being imported. And then so I think that is really interesting, because I think that's when you can start to get a larger picture idea of what's going on in terms of illegal trade. And then at the smaller scale, you might need to tailor your study specifically to ask questions around illegal trade. But yeah, just focusing just on illegal trade at sort of, you know, fisher trader level is really difficult. Like if you're not going to incorporate legal trade as well, you know, your sole purpose is illegal trade, I think that would be a really difficult study to do like as a separate entity, because for obvious reasons. So
Yeah, thank you very much for your answer. That's very interesting. I completely agree with you say. Generally also illegal activities are more hidden and people doesn't like to talk about them that much. So it's obviously much more difficult to obtain data from them. Anna, we had a question from Joseph Amin here in the chat. So very nice. Thank you very much for your question. He would like to know which countries are you focusing on for genetic ID of the shark products, and if there is any reason to choose these countries.
Yeah. So those are the countries where we identified as major players in the global shark meat trade, but that we didn't have all the data that we needed in hand, like available through fisheries statistics or any other sources. So we figured we needed to, put some extra attention in those countries and do like 12 or 24 months market surveys in those areas. So that is Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Indonesia, India, and Sri Lanka. Those are the countries that we're doing genetic analysis and market surveys.
Nice, quite a lot, and can see that they're very focused on the south of the world, global south, like Latin America and Asia. Very interesting.
Yeah, those countries have sorry, Paula.
No, go for it.
Just like a history. I'm not going to say traditional because I can't confirm this right now, but of catching or consuming or trading large amounts of sharks. So we were very interested in knowing more of what was going on in this area. So it's worth the effort of doing this long-term sampling in all those places. It's extremely interesting, high diversity, normally high consumption and catch as well. So lots of interesting things to come up. Yeah.
Is it, just curious about it, is it the consumption of shark meat in Latin America very high too?
It's pretty common. Yeah. It's eating seafood in most of Latin America countries is just part of eating habits. There is a thing as well that sharks and rays are generally sold as under generic names, umbrella names as we call it. So in Brazil, cação, toyo, names that some part of the population don't quite make the connection that they are consuming sharks. So that kind of helps as well to go around consumption preferences if you're not quite sure of what you're buying and you don't really know that you're buying sharks and rays. That helps increasing consumption in those countries. But many traditional dishes made with shark and ray meat or just as substitutes to seafood. Generally, Latin American countries are very religious, Catholic, so there's increasing consumption of white fish during Catholic holidays. So it's a bit of a history there.
Yeah, might be also in Spain. We do have that tradition of eating cathon, and most of the people doesn't know that it's shark. It's especially something that happens in the south of Spain. It doesn't happen that much in the north. But yeah, it probably might be related also to this. Very interesting. Yeah, so something also kind of related to this and also to what Claire was saying earlier, that sometimes regarding the illegal fishing practices, that sometimes the records that you have or reporting doesn't match the records that you have from other places and things like that. We have a question here from Barbara asking that sometimes the recorded imports that they get from Hong Kong and Taiwan, so from Asia markets, are much higher than the reported exports that they get from the European Union to those trade hubs. So have you noticed this in your work, and like how do you deal with these kind of discrepancies on the exports and imports differences?
Thanks, Barbara. It happens a lot. It's actually really hard to match the value of imports with the value of exports being reported by different countries. They also take into consideration different taxes and fees for imports and exports. So matching those numbers is quite high. The other thing we need to consider as well is as you export shark meat, you export as a product. So it's going to be either fillet or minced meat, ground meat, or the wings for the stingrays. So that also doesn't match with the catch and the landings data because the animal has been processed. So matching all these values, these volumes, it's quite hard. We have a few tricks. We generally trust the importer more than the exporter. And what we do in our models is to kind of match both importers and exporters. And so sometimes the exporter doesn't record things properly. So let's say a country is exporting to China who's not reporting. But we can kind of track back and make those connections. And we also use a score for the countries that report it. So some countries report more reliably than others, and that weights a little bit in our models when we're trying to match that up. But it's actually really hard to find, to track one shipment from one country to the other and by the value or by the volume. Generally, it changes quite a lot.
Claire, maybe you want to add something here?
I was just nodding in agreement that I imagine it's really hard and that, it's very difficult to do, isn't it?
I'm going to add Barbara to the screen because she seems to be interested in talking a little bit more about this. So hopefully she will appear soon and we might be able to talk to her about these discrepancies on the exports and imports of the different countries. There she is. Hello.
Hi. I don't know if my audio is working. Yeah, excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for letting me join for a moment. I'm just really interested in the research that Anna Martin is doing. And I just wanted to mention as well that you were mentioning the codes that you use, the HS codes. And what I noticed from the Access to Markets trade database from the EU, they actually have 4 codes for the fins and 27 codes for shark meat. So they actually do differ between some species like blue shark, pike dogfish and cat sharks and porbeagle. And then there's a rest category, which is huge, of course, which is the other sharks. And and I just wanted to ask you as well what you could say about the publication of when it's going to come out, your research, and whether you also mention in your publication this, because I thought it was really interesting that what you just mentioned about the score for the reporting of certain countries, and whether you will mention that in the outcomes as well.
Okay, let's go by parts. Let's see if I remember all your questions. Okay, let's go first. The codes. Since 2012, they've been increasing the number of codes for sharks and rays, but we've been noticed they've been not super used. Most of the imports and exports tend to stay with the older codes, differentiating just sharks and rays, fresh and frozen. And there's also a lot that can go into random codes that we don't even know, right? Like fish oil, any sort of fish preparation. We unfortunately cannot deal with that because how would I know? But it's something that I would definitely have in mind. It's pretty crazy how different countries can report the same product and there's no sort of agreement or someone to monitor and check those things out. Regarding the score, that's part of our modeling process. This is a kind of a very long and full of details model, but everything is going to be available once it's done freely. And we hope to get it all out by next year. Mid next year is is the date, the deadline. But yeah, we're still waiting a few results from some countries, but the bulk of the project will be out by mid next year.
Great.
Did I miss something?
Thank you. No, you did. Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, really looking forward to the results, and thank you for answering all the questions.
Of course.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining the meeting, Barbara, to ask these questions. I think it's very interesting. I'm also looking forward to the results and the publication of this project. I think it's going to be great and very, very eye-opening for many people, probably. So very, very nice. We had another question from Matt Burley. This is a question for both of you. That shark meat seems to show up in very unusual places and unusual products. So he would like to know, what has been your biggest shark in terms of what shark meat have you seen for sale that has actually impressed you?
I don't know. I always think there's like some funny uses for shark products that I've not but I mean, shark meat, I guess it's always used for the same thing, but I guess the process of like really old shark meat sort of being like semi-dried and left out for ages as a particular ingredient for some recipes, that was something to get my head around, I guess. But then also I think it's incredible, like some of the sort of apparently sort of, you know, some shark products are used for sort of stitches and surgery and stuff like that. So I think there's some really amazing, resourceful uses of lots of different shark products. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, I think for shark meat, the fermented shark meat is just the weird thing that I've seen, with all due respect to the people that like it. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's sometimes difficult if you were born or raised in a culture that doesn't include sharks or rays in their food, or that you like not used to see them because you maybe don't have them that much around, like in your beach and like the places you are, to move your mind to these cultures that they include the sharks as part of their lives in all the life moments, like for food, for pleasure, for enjoyment of the ocean and everything. It's a very nice click and way of changing your mind once you get into researching in this world, I think. Or at least that's what happened to me, because I grew up in the north of Spain, where we do get some sharks, but maybe you see one as a normal person, you see one in your life. So it is very, very interesting to how to change the mind to understand these people that coexist with them 24/7. I think that's, yeah, go for it. I have something to say.
Me?
I don't know. Yeah. Did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I could just add to that, is like, I find the cultural connections to sharks very impressive, as well as I learn more about it. Like, you know, traditions coming from beginning of civilizations, and we generally having most of this more like view from Western countries, we just, you know, see sharks as predators and jaws and this kind of things. But like, so many people in other parts of the world have much more different connections and cultural connections to them. So I find it very interesting too.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's super interesting, and I think it's super nice to have this connection with the wildlife that surrounds your place where you live and all the ecosystem around you. Nice. Good. So I am assuming this question is also for you, Anna. This is from Josephat Renteria. He's asking, he would like to know which countries have increased their trade in shark and ray and burning products.
I do remember you from our FAO meeting uh, oh, you got me here because from the top of my head I won't remember. But like, there's some countries that play. Mexico has been increasing over the past decade, like jumping from 10th to like third major country in shark fisheries. Spain, but damn, I won't remember everything from the top of my head, the ones that have been increasing. But Spain has been the major player for decades now, catching and trading the major amounts of shark meat and importing, exporting to several countries, like over 80 countries that they've been exporting meat to. Yeah, I'm gonna stay with those two because I can't remember from the top of my head right now. But definitely Mexico and Spain has been on top like for a long time.
Just a question regarding this, having interest from about Spain on its role on this trade studies. Do you have the information of where do they go to fish these sharks? Because yeah, I know there is shark populations in the Atlantic Ocean and around Mediterranean Sea, maybe around Spain, but I'm sure that, or I hope that they're not just fishing in those areas. So do we know where the main points of fishing sharks that Spain, for example, as a country has?
Spain definitely fishes outside of their economic zone. I'm not able to tell you like all the numbers right now, but definitely a majority of pelagic species. Those are the ones that are the major part of the trade. So including blue sharks there. So in the Atlantic and North and South Atlantic, there will be major fisheries for blue sharks, mako sharks. Pacific, Asia, Southeast Asia. I think those would be the main. Claire, do you have anything to add on that? I think those would be the main points, right?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few distant water fleets in the Indian Ocean as well, like quite a big player for within the sort of those fisheries around the Indian Ocean for sure. Spain's been there traditionally for a little while. Very effective vessels.
Yeah, so basically everywhere around the world, they just go to all the oceans and fish the sharks. Okay, good to know. Nice. Yeah. Maybe we can go with a little bit more of a simple question right now. It's why do you think that we should be studying trade and why trade is important to shark conservation?
Because, in my opinion, trade is the main source of shark catches. So sharks are being caught because of their products, mostly meat, but also fins and some of the other products such as skin, teeth, liver oil. And so I think if we understand trade, we understand patterns of catch, we understand drivers of catch, and we can have a much better feeling for developing management and conservation strategies.
Yeah, 100%. I also think if we understand, the trade and the value chains, then we've got many more opportunities to like intervene in terms of management and policy. If we're just studying fisheries, I guess we're operating on sort of a very fisher-focused sort of management regime, and that can be like often not fair for the fishers, and maybe not the most effective way of doing it. So I like some of the new stuff that's, well, not new stuff, but I guess some of the stuff that operates at different parts along the value chain. So sort of you're looking at demand for different products and then operating at, within stakeholders further up the value chain to try and sort of manage drivers for trade at different points in the, throughout the value chain.
Yeah, and do you think that it's ever going to be possible to 100% and like truly understand how all these trade networks of all the different species and everything works worldwide?
I hope that is, but it won't be me because I will go crazy by then.
Yeah, they're so dynamic. That's the thing as well. You like, even you can take a snapshot like 1 year and then the next year it's completely different, I think, as well, in terms of completely new trade links. And then I think also as a new policy is introduced for some species or for some countries, then it grows another arm or like tentacle. So I think it's like, yeah, very dynamic.
I think
Yeah.
if we, I don't think there's a way that we can cover everything, unfortunately. But I think if we try more and more to focus on traceability, I think that would be like it would be the closest we could get. But yeah, we know how hard it is to actually make those things happen.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think that the idea of understanding everything 100% and how trade works and everything is very idealistic, and it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But all the little steps that we take to understand it are obviously very good and will improve our steps to conservation, and probably will help us decide and take good approaches to take appropriate strategies for this conservation and to control or maybe manage trade a little bit better. Perfect. I think we've gone through most of the questions that we had. I'm very sorry for those people that asked staff to Hollie Booth. Unfortunately, she's not been able to be here today to ask further questions. If you have any very, very specific interests, if you would like to email them to me, I can maybe forward these questions to Hollie and she might get some time to answer them. That's the only thing, that's the only way I can think about to have these questions answered right now. So if you have any specific interest, you can always email me. I'll write my email down on the chat. And I think that was everything for today for us. I don't know if you would like to add something else. I would like to say a big thank you to both of you for giving your time to do the presentations, for all your amazing work, for sharing your experience and all your knowledge. Thank you very much for being here with us and for answering to all the questions. Thank you. It's really appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like we're getting some thank yous in the chat. So Barbara is saying in the chat that she would love to have your email address for further exchange on trade reports, etc., and publications. So I don't know if you're happy to share your email in the chat, or maybe you can email
a
message to Barbara directly if you would like to do it in private, something like that.
Okay. I can do that.
Yes. Perfect. I hope everyone enjoyed the little discussion that we had here about trade and all the facts that our speakers have shared with us. Thank you very much for joining us today and for being here in the session with us. I'm going to stay around for a few more minutes. So if you have any other questions, you can still put them in the chat. Have like 5 more minutes to answer to these ones. So yeah, go for it.
Thanks for the invite, Paula, and for organizing everything. That was lovely.
Of course, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for your participation. And I'll make sure I keep in touch with you because I'm very interested in these publications.
Yeah, no, I love talking about this. Yeah, anytime.
Thank you very, very much. See you.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.